Alrighty, and I'm joined by Matt Wagner, senior producer at Eagle Dynamics. Good day, sir, and welcome to the stream.
Hey, Deepak. Glad to be here.
Yeah, yeah. We have to now pretend that we've not been talking for 15 minutes already. But yeah, welcome. We've got you on board today with some questions, just to kind of
Yeah.
get a feel for what's going on in the wonderful world of DCS world. So the first one that I've got here is, how did you get into sim development?
Well, sim development side probably goes way back to uh, being contacted or reaching out to different flight sim developers back in probably like mid 1990s, 94 or 95 timeframe,
Mhm.
and initially doing some external testing. This is also back when I was still at CIA, so obviously I had to be very careful about uh, how I tested and what information was provided. But some of that initial testing led to some of the different contacts I had within the industry, particularly at Electronic Arts, Jane's Combat Simulations, which is the first company I worked for. And then also, even way back then, initial contacts with Eagle Dynamics. I was a big fan of Flanker 1.5 back then and did a lot of time with online leaderboards.
Hmm.
And during that process, met guys like Nick Gray, Jim McConaughey, Igor Tishin. And then later, once Jane's Combat Sims folded, that's when I went to work with them. But yeah, it actually started way back when in the mid 1990s, starting with external testing.
So you were reaching out to these companies as a fan of flight simulation and seeing how you could get involved.
Absolutely.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, even when I was like 10, 12 years old, I was, playing flight sims like on the Atari 400 and 800 and
Wow.
games like platforms like that. So flight sims have always been a massive aspect of my life. So, way back then, God, there's no way I ever would have dreamed to be doing what I'm doing these days.
Working directly for the chocolate factory.
Yeah. When they say sometimes, never make your hobby your work. Well, I tend to disagree. For me, it's worked out quite well.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Wow, that's really exciting. And then I guess a kind of follow-on question to that would be, what would you say was the first flight simulation game that you ever played, and on what platform?
Boy, I think it was MiG Alley Ace on the Apple II, if I remember right.
Wow. Okay, that's quite a computer. The Apple II
Yeah.
was very, impressive for its age.
Maybe it was the original Apple. I can't remember, but it's definitely, uh, I think MiG Alley Ace or something to that extent. But it was definitely on an Apple. And then after that, it was probably the original Jet
Hmm.
on a early IBM PC, like a PS2 or something like that.
All right, all right. In my case, it was F-19 Stealth Fighter on the Atari
Ah,
STE,
that was a fun one.
which I
Yeah.
enjoyed very much. And it was one of those ones that came with a keyboard overlay that you,
Yep.
yeah, that was that era when you dropped your keyboard overlay on was quite an interesting time.
Absolutely. Yeah, oh, yeah. Yeah, how
Okay.
far we've come.
Oh, I know, absolutely. Now we have these reproductions of real world,
I know it's nuts.
sticks and throttles and whatnot. It's very impressive.
Yeah. Yeah, and you
Nice.
combine that with VR with the, AR aspects,
Yeah.
it's pretty amazing. I never
Actually,
thought we'd, be where we are now.
interesting that you should bring that one up because yeah, something that I've often noticed in DCS when you go into the settings and go into specials, there's quite a
Mhm.
number of different AR and VR solutions listed in there.
Yeah.
Eagle Dynamics seem to be kind of implementing a bit of everything in that regard. Um,
Well, a lot of that has to do with, as most people I'm sure realize, in addition to the entertainment side, we also have a very extensive professional side as well.
hmm,
And often what happens is those two different endeavors benefit each other. So
ah,
in this case, what you're seeing with the AR mostly is a result of work we've done on the professional side that we're able to also then port into the entertainment side.
so then we all get to benefit. Nice. How much of that stuff have you played around with yourself?
With the AR, not at all, actually. Unfortunately, I don't have a home cockpit home or anything like that, so I really haven't been able to use it myself. But yeah, for the professional side, it's a pretty big aspect of what we do.
Nice. All right. That's cool. And yeah, my next question is, what are some of your favorite Sims? And I guess we've touched on some of your earliest ones, and you are, of course, allowed to
Mm.
say DCS World if you want.
Well, that's a given.
Yeah.
I think some of the others that really hooked me in for long periods of time. Um, One would certainly be Falcon 3.0. One of my favorite memories of that was being able to create different squadrons with all the pilots,
Hmm.
and then renaming all the pilots to friends and family members and things like that.
Ah,
And seeing as they progressed, deciding which missions to put them on. It got very invested in that aspect of it, which is certainly something I really want to put into DCS at some point, where we have a much deeper squadron simulation
hmm.
where you can build up AI pilots with different skill sets.
Oh,
Kind of like different role playing games. As
ah,
you gain experience and do things, skill levels ramp up. So if you have a pilot that's say really good in BVR with those skills, continued use of those skills increases those. So then when you have a mission to do a cap, then you go ahead and assign that pilot. So that was one of my favorite things about that. Another one that I really enjoyed a lot was a Tornado digital integration.
oof. Oh, yes. Such a good
That
game.
was one.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I still remember to this day is just not even so much flying, but using the free cam,
Hmm.
just following rows and see where they would go.
Yeah.
And at that time, it was one of the first games and maps where the world felt like it had continuity, that things made sense. That
Yeah.
power lines went to power plants, roads went to different cities and urban centers. So there's that aspect of it. And then, it was a quote unquote dynamic campaign. It was more of a phased campaign. It wasn't not a live dynamic campaign. But even so, it was, I found it very fun
Hmm.
and immersive.
Yes. Same.
Um,
That's actually one I
which,
played quite a bit of as well. It was a
yeah,
lot of fun. And
yeah,
it's another example of these. I John knew the term for it. I always forget these menu
mhm,
systems where it's kind of real world locations and you travel through them and so on.
yep.
All these old flight simulators seemed to have those, and it was kind of a bit of fun. But yeah, squadron management, that sounds like a really cool idea. I wonder how and if that could tie into the dynamic campaign as well.
Yeah, and with a lot of the initial internal designs, that's one of the things we want to integrate essentially as part of the dynamic campaign, so that when you have your ATO
Hmm.
and you're manning your aircraft, eventually, my hope is that you can then actually go to your squadron manager and pick the pilots from your squadron, have the highest skills for that particular mission.
Cool. Okay, that does sound very interesting. Okay, so yeah, Falcon 3 and Tornado, very very good choices, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, and
Um,
F-19, like you, was also one of my favorites as well.
yeah, yeah, F-19 was good fun. And, perhaps lacking in that kind of realistic feel you're talking about with Tornado, because the
Mhm.
landscape in F-19 was very strangely flat with little triangle
Yep,
pyramids representing hills and things. But it was a lot of
yep,
fun. It was a lot of fun.
yep. Oh, and Longbow 2 is also
Aha.
definitely one of my favorites.
Yes, yes, that's a classic for sure. A little bit later.
And then, of course, Flanker 1.5, which is, probably the most influential game on my professional career,
Hmm.
which is also a massive part of my life back then.
Cool. Alrighty. And then it wouldn't have been that much, a few years later, you were, of course,
Mhm.
working on Lomac. Am I right in saying?
Yeah, actually, even before then, they brought this is back when SSI was the publisher of the Flanker series.
Mhm.
And I was brought on about midway through development of Flanker 2.5, which
Okay.
we ended up actually releasing as a free update.
Yes. I actually did. I did play Flanker 2 and 2.5 back in the day as well. But yeah, those were good. It was such a big step up on the graphics because I played a lot of Flanker 1 and I thought it was
Mhm.
fantastic. And the simulation kind of blew my mind. It was the first flight simulator that I flew where I really felt the inertia of the aircraft and it really felt like it had
Mhm.
some kind of an actual flight model. Um,
Mhm.
but the graphics, of course, were very, very basic. Um,
Oh, yeah.
which was probably a good thing. That was, to maintain frame rates back in those days. But then I remember
Sure.
upgrading to Flanker 2 and
Mhm.
thinking, wow, okay, now we're talking. Now this looks
Yeah.
like something.
Yep. Actually, texture graphics at that point for the first time in the Flanker series.
Yes, yes, and got rid of the funny dithering of the smoke and things like that.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Right.
Alrighty.
But in many ways, yeah, Flanker 1.5 was, I think a bit ahead of its time.
Hmm.
There's not much, but there's a few elements way back in Flanker 1.5 I still want to see in DCS.
Oh, okay. Well, do tell, sir. Do
The
tell.
little tiny things, for example, like when the SA-15 launches, it actually ejects the missile vertically, and only after it's ejected does the motor light. And then you also have the directional rockets in the nose to kind of orient it towards
Oh,
the target.
yeah.
And way back in Flanker 1.5, it actually modeled that.
Uh-huh.
Whereas currently in DCS, it just kind of whooshes right out of the launcher,
Okay.
like other SAMs. So even
Yeah.
little details like that, I still want to get in there at some point.
There were a bunch of those kinds of very small details, even in Flanker
Yeah,
1 as well, because I recall a bunch of
absolutely.
that stuff. It was, yeah, it
Yep.
felt very accurate. It was nice. Um,
Yeah.
hmm, cool. Alrighty. So yeah, I guess actually that kind of feeds into another question I have here. What features from some other classic Sims do you think were missing and would be cool to implement? And I guess you're mentioning ones from your own back catalogue, but I wonder if there are
Yeah.
ones out with that.
Well, the big one, of course, is dynamic campaign. Yeah, it's the big elephant in the room, naturally.
No, wait, yeah,
And
are you sure? I don't remember anyone ever mentioning that.
and like I was saying before, I think the thing that really engrossed me, dynamic campaign wise, was Falcon 3.0,
Hmm.
and that's something that is obviously long overdue in DCS. Obviously, it's something that we consider a very high priority, and we've been actively working on it for years right now. Obviously, it's taken us much longer than we expected. It's been a much uh, bigger task than we had originally planned, which we said before. Um, but it's progressing every day. The big things we're working on right now, of course, is continuing AI. As most people, I think, probably realize, for a dynamic campaign to work, there has to be substantial improvements in the DCS AI system,
Hmm.
both tactical and strategic.
Yeah, yeah,
So
exactly. You
that's
need like a
continuing.
whole new AI, in fact,
Yeah.
to be the
Yeah.
commander of the Red Forces.
Yep. And the nice thing is that, these AI advancements will not just benefit dynamic campaign, of course, but they'll also then roll over to DCS in general, whether it's single missions, scripted campaigns, and so on.
Hmm.
The other big item we're actively working right now, a big thing, is of course, is now that we've identified what we can do technically within the dynamic campaign. Now what we're starting to do is actually flesh out the entire UI system that takes
Hmm.
advantage of that.
Yeah, I've noticed that recently most of the patches have included nice tweaks to the UI and additions to the mission editor. So I'm assuming
Yeah.
these are our fringe benefits coming our way.
A bit. It's going to be a whole new interface system to support dynamic campaign.
Hmm.
But even then, you have to also realize we're going to have the client side, the player interface, but we also has to have a separate interface to do the dynamic campaign creation tool.
Ah, I see. Hmm. That's very cool.
So it's not just again creating one UI system for that, but the tools just as important.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, I wonder.
It's also
Sorry,
it's
go
going
ahead.
to. I'm sorry. A big part of this too is, given that DCS ranges from World War II to modern day
Hmm.
across many types of maps, we also have to create a dynamic campaign system that will support that. Now, initially, just at release, we're focusing on modern day in the Caucasus, but that by no means does that mean that we're stopping there. Obviously, we're going to be doing, all the maps over all periods, but we're just going to start, with modern day on the Caucasus. Again, the typical, walk before you run.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. I was wondering, related to the dynamic campaign, did you ever play
Mhm.
Eurofighter 2000 or the
I
Total
did.
Air War
Yeah, yeah.
series?
Oh, yeah. We're talking about games from my past that I really enjoyed. That was another huge one. I didn't
Yeah,
get as much into, oh God, it was the F-22 one over
I think it was called Total Air
Africa.
War, the one with the
Totally,
F-22.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, for some reason that one didn't click for me as much, but EF-2000, oh yeah,
yeah.
love that one.
Like, rose tinted glasses and all that. I don't know if the dynamic campaign in that would stand up today, but I certainly remember at the time being very impressed by it and it feeling quite engaging.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think it had all the core elements of a dynamic campaign. But like you said, looking back, it's really easy to have rose-colored glasses, particularly when it comes to like the systems of the aircraft and things like that. I
Mm,
think a lot of times if people went back and actually replayed them, they'd realize just how simplified a lot of the stuff actually was.
yes.
But yeah, that was another, classic example of what a well put together dynamic campaign can do. Oh, another one. I'm sorry, I keep going one after the other.
Go for it.
Was Apache versus Hokum was one of my favorites as well, which also
Oh,
had, again, it wasn't a live dynamic campaign. If I remember, I was a staged campaign, but still, that was a lot of fun for me too.
cool. That's one I never played, but I was aware of it.
Missed out.
Yeah, sounds like it. Um, so yeah, if you want to take a break from flight simulation, we've been talking a lot about flight simulation.
Mm.
What does Wags do when he doesn't want to fly
Uh,
a plane in a simulator?
there's the other side.
Other side, the guitar.
Back there it is.
Yes.
Yeah, one of my guitars.
Ah,
Yeah, actually, same time with flight sims. Music's always been a huge part of my life. Bands all through high school and college. Not so much now. I kind of gave up on band drama after college, but
aha.
still like to play.
Nice. Okay, that's cool. That's cool. And yeah, what's your most proud development in DCS? What's the thing that you've delivered in DCS world? You've been like, yes, that's pretty damn good.
I think the big one is the scope of the product,
Mm,
in that you have games that do a particular aircraft well, one or two aircraft. You have other products that do a array of aircraft at a lower fidelity. But I think the one thing I'm proud of most that I don't think anyone else has really done even close to the extent DCS has is building a product with such a wide array of aircraft and time periods and maps
mm,
that it's built a sandbox system that I think is quite unique. Now, of course, some people may look at that as non-focus,
mhm.
but the focus of the product is that broad scope to allow users and mission creators and content creators to give them the tools to create that content. Now, again, a big part of us moving forward now is not just relying on third parties to create that content, providing more first party content as well. Of course, campaign being a big one. The quick mission, quick action builder we just released earlier this year, and other elements we're working on to increase the gameplay elements of it. But having that sandbox that you could fly, anywhere from a P-51 Mustang up to an F-35 in the not too distant future, I think is rather unique.
Yeah.
And of course, doing that, both a single player and multiplayer. Oh, so another one of my favorites was Chuck Yeager's Air Combat.
Oh, I did play that
Yeah,
one. That is amazing. And
and one of my
speaking of a game that has an immense scope,
yep,
for its time, that one had
yeah,
quite an incredible scope.
it did, and that's actually maybe a little bit in the DNA of DCS as well, of
Hmm.
having that ability to have different eras of air combat and be able to mix and match as you wish.
Yeah.
So, plane chucks, whether it's, flying a BF-109 against, God, I'm trying to remember even the aircraft now, like an F-4, that was very unique at the time.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the things that, DCS brings to the flight sim world that's, rather unique.
Absolutely. And it's funny because you were talking about it being a sandbox, and
Yeah.
that's always how I viewed it. I've always like the most common thing I do when I start up
Mhm.
DCS is I open the mission editor. That's
Yeah.
where I spend most of my time, and almost all of my sessions begin
Mhm.
there if I'm not going multiplayer. And yeah, you sometimes get people
Yeah.
talking about balance. And say, oh, for example, the F-35, of course. Oh, you're adding the F-35. It's going
No,
to
it's how you make
unbalance the
up
whole
it's how you
game.
create the
And it's
mission.
like, yeah, yeah. I've always found that a very
Yeah.
strange argument to make. It's like it's up to the mission makers. It's up to the server owners and runners to decide. Are you going to put a BF, whatever, alongside F-35? Obviously, you're not. You're going to create compelling scenarios using the
Well,
contents of your
well,
sandbox.
and
So yeah, it's down to the user to
and I
bring
think
that
the other thing to
balance.
keep in mind here too is we talk about balance. A lot of the times, even on this podcast, I hear a lot of the term balance thrown around in regards to primarily multiplayer. Whereas multiplayer is certainly a
Hmm.
very important part of aspect of DCS. In terms of our install base, it's a rather small minority. Again, that by no means
Mhm.
does it mean that's not important, that we don't support and will support it. Certainly will. Um, but our primary audience is still single player. So something like an F-35, which right now it doesn't have an equivalent player-controlled aircraft. It's still going to make it, I think, a very compelling single-player experience. With a multiplayer, no, I agree, probably not as much until we have a comparable aircraft, fifth gen, in there. But I think something like the F-35 is more oriented towards single player. That, of course, doesn't mean you can't play it in multiplayer. Sometimes quantity has its own quality. So,
Yeah,
but
for sure.
so near,
Yeah. So I guess kind of what you're hinting at here is that these curated single player experiences effectively fix these problems. The campaigns that are
Mhm.
advertised in the store and that are
Yeah,
made by third parties are a great way of
absolutely.
addressing that.
And of course, dynamic campaign for something like the F-35, a single player in particular, multiplayer, yeah, as well. Um, but for something like the F-35, particularly for single players, can be critical for us to add, at least AI-wise, more comparable threats, whether it's a felon or a J-10 or a J-20 or something like that. I think in the future that's going to be certainly more important that we have a more compelling uh, combat environment for fifth gen aircraft. That's something we still need.
Hmm. Okay, that's an interesting point. Speaking of
Mhm.
aircraft that you develop for the sim, what are your criteria for selecting a module to develop in
In
house?
house. Well, probably the
Yeah.
biggest, of course, is obviously we're not a nonprofit, so we have to. If we're going to build something, it's going to have to be turn a profit or at least break even at the very least. So a big part that is going to be choosing aircraft that we believe will generate sufficient interest that people want to buy it.
Hmm.
There's a lot of super interesting aircraft out there. It's like maybe some of the Cold War Russian aircraft or some of the Century Series fighters, all certainly interesting aircraft. But for us to even break even on them would be difficult.
Mhm.
Whereas there's other aircraft we could do with the same amount of effort, more modern aircraft in particular, and Western, that will require the same amount of time and resources, but be more profitable to allow us to build bigger and better things. So generally, what you've already noticed is for aircraft like that. Again, maybe some of the Century Series fighters is a good example. We usually have the third parties do those.
Mhm.
Like RG's doing the 104 is a good example, or Grinnell is doing the Hun right now.
Mm.
I think it's a good choice of how we delineate between first party and third party aircraft choices. Another big one, of course, is which is near and dear to my heart in time, is available references. Now,
Ah,
references come in all shapes and sizes. A lot of people, when they say references, well, you must be talking about manuals. Manuals help by all means, but if you take the time to look, there's often a good um, library of technical manuals, not particular to the aircraft, but maybe the subsystems.
mhm.
You have academic papers, you have different demonstrations. There's a lot of information out there that's available, but you really got to dig to find it. It's never a case that we use an air show as an example to build something that would be absolutely silly.
Ah.
It's a very excuse me.
I guess an interesting point alongside that is that aircrew manuals are lacking in a lot of the information that you might actually require to develop a module, because they're more
Absolutely.
along the lines of press this button, then press this button, then do this, rather than what the actual
Yeah.
capabilities might be.
So, like the Vibrant Hornet, as you might imagine, there's a wealth of actual manuals out there.
Mm.
Something like the F-35, it's actually quite the opposite. There's no flight manuals available. But, after, and a lot of this I did myself after about over a year of searching, we were able to find quite a bit of academic papers, technical papers, demonstrations, and other resources to build the design that we feel will, get to generally what we search for is around, 80 to 90%,
Mhm.
like we do with all aircraft. And of course, there's no DCS aircraft. Actually, I don't think there's any flight sim aircraft in modern day that's going to model anything in 100%.
Mm.
So there's always that matter of diminishing returns that you could try to go to 100%. In the end, it's going to negatively impact the product and the product series in the end.
Yeah,
So there's always a tough call there of, when is enough enough, which is a whole different conversation, as you might imagine.
yeah,
But
yeah.
so yeah, so references is another big one. Um, again, we read God virtually every message, particularly Norman Scott, and we're always listening to what people want.
Hmm.
So that's a huge part of it, which kind of goes back to the first point of is it going to sell? And a large part of what we determine is it going to sell or not is based on what customer feedback is. But again, we have to be very careful because there's always, small, very vocal elements of the customer base that may want something, but it just wouldn't make sense from a business point of view. So we have to be careful not to let the tail wag the dog too much. But it doesn't, obviously prevent us from listening, and it's always a big factor. A third big one, of course, is the supporting technology.
Mm.
So if there's all new technology that we've never done before, that's going to be an impact because we're going to have to of course, account for the time and resources, or do we even have the engineers on board to be able to create that technology? And even if we did, what are those engineers lined up to do, say, over the next 2 to 3 years? Resources are always finite. So if we're going to do anything, it's not in a vacuum. We have to know where we're going to pull that from. And if we pull resources from one place, what else is going to suffer? And that's one of the
Interesting.
big things that Kate, Nick, and I are often doing is trying to decide how we balance these resources to get the best game possible.
Yeah.
It's a tough one.
You were talking about having the technology available to make a module, and that's a very,
Mhm.
very interesting point. Because, of course, the first DCS module, or I guess it was actually prior to DCS World technically, but the Black Shark, the K50,
Like shark. Yep.
um, I
Yep.
can only imagine that that was a very, very interesting technical challenge when it comes to the flight model,
Yeah.
because
Well,
prior
not
to
just the flight model,
hmm,
also the first fully 3D clickable cockpit as well.
yes. Yeah. I remember when you were doing your kind of preview series of videos about it at the
Oh, way
time.
back when.
Yeah, you were filming it with Track IR, and I remember the first time that I saw you shifting your head from side
Mm,
to side,
right.
bringing the HUD into the
Yep.
field of view and back out again. Obviously, I
Right.
was immediately wowed by that.
Right.
uh, yeah, so very, very interesting. And yeah, of course, not even just a helicopter, because it was the first helicopter that Eagle Dynamics developed, but you chose
Mhm.
possibly the most complex helicopter or military helicopter that you could have gone for. So that's a very,
One of
very
them, yeah.
interesting one to go for.
Yeah, and as you might imagine, one of the big reasons we did that was because we had the references and SMEs and the data to do it.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm just my point really being
Mhm.
that feels like hard mode. It feels like you
It was.
chose
It was
you
a big
chose
lift.
quite a challenge and you met it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think looking back, if we could have started with like a Huey or something like that,
Hmm.
which is a much more simple helicopter with equal, if not probably better references. But yeah, we chose to start with Black Shark.
Yes, yeah, very cool indeed. I guess. Hmm, yeah, I was thinking about modules that you've developed in house. Um, are there any that you feel were chosen and Eagle Dynamics developed them more so because you were just so excited about having that particular module in the sim? So do you feel
Mustang,
like Mustang? There you go. There you go. Okay. Uh,
Mustang, and probably the Yak 52.
oh, I really like the Yak 52. Actually, that one's a really nice
Yeah, that
aircraft.
was much more of a passion project
Yes.
than a revenue project. If you know what I mean?
Yeah. So somebody at the company was like, "We must have this," and so it was worked on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But one of our actually our head of IT is actually a renowned Yak 52 aerobatic pilot.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I've never flown anything like that in real life, but I've flown the Yak 52 quite a bit in DCS World, and its
Mhm.
maneuverability is crazy, absolutely
Mhm.
crazy. But then that's what it does.
To the P-51, as I'm sure probably most listeners know, Nick Gray, the company owner,
Hmm.
is also the director of the fighter collection and has flown countless World War II aircraft. So he's been wanting to do a World War II aircraft for quite a while at that point.
Hmm.
So that was our first kind of toe dip into the warbirds, and obviously Nick had a huge role in that part of it.
Yeah, and it's now a free part of the sim alongside the SU twenty
Yeah,
five.
yeah, the TF-51D. Yep.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. And then I guess you know, a similar question. What are the criteria for a third party developer to develop their first
Mhm.
module with you? How does a third party developer convince Eagle Dynamics that they can be
Mhm.
trusted to bring it over the line?
Well, that has changed quite a bit over the years. I think earlier on, when we first started doing third-party projects, our lines we drew of what we would award a license agreement to was dramatically lower than what it is now.
Hmm.
Um, you know, there was one project in particular. If I had a time machine, I never would have okayed it, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
These days, in terms of what we decide to do, um, it's mostly first about demonstrating skill set and capability. We'd first need to see, do they have the art skills to actually build an external model in a cockpit to the quality level of DCS in 2025.
Hmm.
We need to see examples of, can they do the avionics systems, even basic HUD and steam gauges and things like that. If they have the coding capability uh, to do it, not just the art. So a lot of it is about capability. Naturally, we want to be careful about new projects overlapping existing ones.
Hmm.
So really it doesn't behoove us right now to say, have an F-15A out there, and the F-15C is still a very successful product. It just doesn't really make sense for us right now. Down the road, quite possibly. Timing is very important. Again, avoiding duplication of product is very important as well. Another big ones is in terms of who's actually developing and leading those third-party companies. Of how have they presented themselves online, social media, forums, and discourse and things like that. How professional and easy are to work with. If they're an established one that maybe have done products with other companies, what's their past history of quality, supporting their product, how do they interact with their customers? All of those are different factors that we look at when choosing third parties now.
Hmm, interesting. How often is it the case that you have to say, sorry, guys, not going to happen, not this time?
About 50%.
Yeah, yeah. That's kind of what I would expect. Hmm,
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, again, the bar we set is much higher than it used to be.
Mhm.
There's certainly projects that we've rejected that we probably would accept as say 5 or 6 years ago. But like with most things, over time you learn your lessons, usually the hard way.
Yeah.
So our criteria is just much higher than it used to be.
Hmm. Somewhat related question. You currently have third parties developing aircraft modules and also
Mhm.
maps. Um, are there other kinds of module that you can foresee third parties perhaps being involved with in the future?
Well, the big third one, of course, are campaigns.
Ah, of course.
Um, uh, Eventually, and again, it comes down to, unfortunately, shared resources, is having a tool system for ground units.
Oh, mm,
Now, eventually, I'd love to see, I think the team as a general would love to see, highly detailed, like an Abrams or a T-90 or whatever. But, in order to do that, first, of course, we'd have to have a, greatly
s-
expanded SDK in order to
mhm,
make such development possible. But that also then touches on to other elements, more DCS wide, of a much more detailed and specific damage modeling system.
mhm,
Right now, the ground unit damage modeling system is rather simplistic. And yeah, it doesn't really need to be. Again, the primary role of DCS right now is a flight sim. It's not an armor sim.
mm,
But if we were to make it an armor sim, then yeah, of course, we're going to have to go in there and create a much more detailed, like what we call X-ray
mm,
type systems within a ground unit. The other big part of that is where, particularly the latest maps have, a great amount of detail. They're not at the detail that would be needed at ground level for a ground game.
mm,
So, whether it's a much um, higher level of resolution in the ground mesh, better ground mesh textures, collapsible buildings and structures, there would still need to be, I think, quite a bit done to the world to make that. So going back to your question, elements that we may expand on in the future for third parties, I think ground units could be one, but which what I'm trying to get across now is it's not as simple as saying, well, let's just do that. And
yeah.
again, there has to be big SDK changes as well as world changes, damage modeling changes. Uh, it'd be a pretty big task. Not saying it's never going to happen. Right now, the same resources to do those type of things are very occupied with other higher priority tasks right now.
Mm. Yeah. It's something else I was thinking about. I've just started my series just now on the NS430. So I was also
Yeah.
thinking
So,
about devices that could be installed in
mm,
aircraft as well, if
mhm.
that's something that would be doable by a third party.
Potentially, it'd be, I think, more of a case of, again, whether the SDK could support that or not.
Hmm.
Because you also have to be careful that, even with our own projects, uh, our cup is overrunning in terms of things we need to do. So our time is very limited to creating new technology and resources for third parties. We still do it. C-130 is a good example.
Hmm.
But we have to be very judicious in how we allocate our resources.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes perfect sense. Um, okay. Let's let's go to a more personal question. What is your
Yep.
exact role at ED, and what does a day in the life of Wags look like when you're at work?
Boy, it really varies from day to day. I don't think there's actually a title that is accurate. I guess the technical title I use right now when I have to is senior producer, but it varies. Even today in this discussion, we talked about things like managing resource allocation, deciding where we go with a project in the future. A big part is essentially being a firewall to make sure we don't put anything of a classified nature or sensitive nature in the game,
Hmm,
which is particularly important given that we have a foot in the professional side.
yeah.
The last thing in the world we want to do is put something into the DCS title that would give any professional clients concern
Hmm,
that we couldn't handle restricted information in a professional way. So a lot of it is myself and others just checking, double checking, triple checking information about sources before we put anything into the game. Um,
Does your
Obviously,
background help you in that regard?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, one of the things uh, back in my former life was, exploiting information, um, come to different conclusions. And a lot of that is through open sources. So
Uh-huh.
I understand, what different intelligence services could potentially use to kind of tease out capability. So I'm always very careful to make sure that we're not giving a leg up to any potential adversaries that want to use something, particularly as a training aid. And I think I've talked about this in earlier interviews. I think even with Jello way back when was the last thing in the world I want to do is create DCS to a degree that it could be used by an adversary military
Ah,
to train against uh,
I
U.S.
guess.
forces or allied forces that I work with.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. Okay. Um, and okay, different question. What examples from the modding community have kind of surprised and impressed you?
Probably some of the aircraft, T-45. I thought those guys did a fantastic job with that,
Yeah.
external, internal, even the systems. Actually, I was just watching a video yesterday, I think from Growler Jams,
Mhm.
talking about the T-45. I was very impressed with what those guys have done. Same with the A4. I thought fantastic job as well. I'd love to see the A4 at some point actually integrated into DCS,
Mm,
whether it's through them or somebody else. I think we had excellent aircraft to add at some point.
yeah.
There's some of the ones that really stood out to me. I think a lot of the scripting guys have done a great job, particularly for the multiplayer servers.
Yeah. Yeah. You mean systems like Moose and such like?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Mist and things like that.
Uh-huh.
Some of the sound packs, like the guys at Echo 19, have done a really fantastic job.
Yeah. And
Some of the skin artists out there are just absolutely phenomenal, I think.
yeah, I'm also thinking of the OV10 Bronco. I was very impressed with that one.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah, and of course, there's the free version, the C-130, which is, obviously, that's a good example of a talented third party that first started as a mod
Mm.
that is now expanding that into a full aircraft.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, interesting. You mentioned the T45. I've also seen the recent videos about it, and I've been thinking that that's definitely one I need to pay a visit in my kind of
Mm.
community modding series of videos. It's a very
Oh,
cool
yeah,
aircraft.
absolutely.
Hmm. Okay, dokie. So I had a question here, which was about improvements to core simulation systems. Well, not really core
Yep,
systems, but anyway, things like the logbook, online statistics, and things
yep,
like that. But you actually touched on that earlier a little bit when you were talking about the concept of like squadron management coming to
yeah,
the sim. So
absolutely.
yeah, I guess that's kind of very similar. I guess.
Yeah, I think that's definitely an area we can certainly expand upon, not just as a logbook like we have now, but I think as a gameplay tool about actually having the stats of the different pilots in the squadron
Hmm.
having an actual impact on who you put into the flight. I think that'd be um, at least for me, a
Yeah.
greatly appreciated gameplay element to add into the game. Much more of the kind of that role playing element.
I wonder for the multiplayer side as well if there
Mhm.
would be any possibility of integrating with virtual squadrons in some way, where the logbooks could ping your values to
Oh
something
yeah,
hosted by the virtual squadron, and you would have like a
yep,
centralized logbook fed by the sim.
yep, yeah, absolutely.
A bit more of an
It also
endeavor.
kind of feeds in, it kind of a little bit feeds into what we're doing right now with Super Carrier is the Ready Room,
Oh
which
yes,
started as a much less ambitious product or endeavor than we thought it was. And
yeah,
that's why this is taking so long. Again, this is definitely a case of a bit of feature creep
oh yeah,
because if we're going to do what we want to do something right. And one element of that, of course, is the greenie board
ah yes,
of
yes.
kind of track your landings within a squadron as well and be able to compare, which then online squadrons could be able to use for bragging rights.
Yeah, in VAF we do maintain a greenie board, and
Ah, okay. Yep.
the Navy chaps are very proud of their numbers. Um, but yeah, interesting. You mentioned the ready room and feature creep. I have noted that every time the ready room is mentioned in the newsletter, I often find myself
Yeah.
surprised because there's some more functionality that's mentioned each time that it comes out. I think
Yeah.
it wasn't that long ago when you had an update where you were talking about the tablets
Yeah.
and the fact that you'd be able to adjust your route and adjust your
Yeah.
loadout on tablets while you're in the
Again, that was
ready
one of
room,
the
which is
big things
that's
we
amazing
added from the
immersion.
original
That sounds like
design
it'd be a lot of fun.
was the ability to do planning on the tablet within the ready room without having to go through like the DTC manager or the mission editor functions to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, we already got some of
Yep.
this functionality in the multiplayer lobby now, where we have the route planner, which is very nice. And I even actually, I'm not sure if you guys mentioned it in the manuals or
Yep.
not, but I
Yep.
actually realized that it generates little text files that you can then actually pull out and distribute, which is very, very cool as well. So yeah, a great extra bit of functionality. Alrighty, and then
Yeah.
I've got
Shoot.
some. I've just got some kind of
Okay.
more random questions about little features and ideas around the sim. So yeah, I was wondering
Oh
if
yeah.
if you've thought about storage management.
Yeah.
It's something that all of us have come up against. Actually, it's more so a shortcoming of Windows than it is the simulator, the way that it deals with
Yep.
drives, and it's not always easy to kind of amalgamate them in a sensible way. But certainly,
Absolutely.
I've
Yeah.
regularly had the
So,
situation where I have to uninstall a
in
map so I
addition, of
can
course,
install
the
another one.
public version,
Yeah.
we have an internal version called the trunk, and that's used for development. And one of the things we can do on our trunk is be able to store maps on any drive and be able to point DCS to that drive to load that map. And that's one of the things we're doing right
Oh.
now is, putting that functionality together within the UI system on the front end to allow users to put things like maps on any drive and they'll be able to point to them rather than having everything in
Mhm.
DCS on a single drive. Because, like you said, unless you have maybe like an 8 terabyte drive, if you have a large
Ah.
collection of maps, there's no way they're all going to fit. Much less if you want to have other games and things like that on the drive. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's something we're very well.
Hmm.
It's all.
All right. Okay.
Okay.
Well, I've got one last question for you. Okay. Yeah. What would WAGs like to see in DCS? Is there an aircraft or a feature or something that you're like, you know,
Well,
if I was
the easy and the
unrestrained, I would
100%
just tell
honest
the team
answer,
to
of
make
course, is
this now.
dynamic campaign. That's, it's my kind of
Aha.
white whale for DCS, which is something I've been wanting years and years and years to get into the game. So, obviously, that's the easy and uh, answer.
Mhm.
In terms of aircraft, which maybe is maybe more where you're looking at, um, think maybe a Super
Hmm.
Cobra. I would love to see a Super Cobra. Yeah,
Oh my! Everybody likes the
yeah,
Super Cobra. That actually it often excites chat
yeah.
whenever it's
I think a Gripen
brought
also
up.
be a very
So
interesting,
I
fun
imagine you're
aircraft in the
not the
game.
only one.
But that's a case where
Yes, yes.
um,
I'm a big fan of the Gripen.
there's no manuals, but unlike the F-35, you can't even really find much in terms of useful other references. Which again, it kind of goes back to what I was saying before. We're able to do F-35, again, not
Yes,
because
yeah.
of air
I
shows and silly things like that, but because we have a pretty good depth of other references and documentation for that aircraft. I just can't say the same thing for a Gripen.
hmm, no,
Yeah.
no. The
But
Swedish
also,
government
as
are very very
we
tight lipped
kind of
about stuff like that.
announced not too long ago, we have our FAL coming to the game and also some other aircraft. But I think our FAL is also going to be a very interesting aircraft. And no, I can't talk about who's going to be the developer. Yeah. That's going to be a fun aircraft.
Rafale is very exciting. Yeah, yeah. Uh, I was very
It
happy
is.
when I heard
The
about that
French
because
build very
Rafale is
beautiful
just
aircraft, I
such
think.
a beautiful machine and very very capable. Yes, definitely,
Okay.
definitely. Well, that's the end of my list of questions. So this is a moment where I'm going to ask you:
Yeah,
is there
I
something I
think
didn't
we
ask
can
you that
talk
I
about
should
some of the
have?
bigger questions I see on a day-to-day basis because I really had all the best intentions in mind to do,
Yeah.
every 3 or 4 months these Q&As. Unfortunately, personal life and professional life priorities kind of got in the way, so I've been more than a bit delinquent on updating customers on DCS
Mhm.
questions. So we talked about a dynamic campaign already. We're working on right now. Again, most of the focus again is on the AI and UI systems, and we're hoping to have something internal to start taking a look at by the end of this year.
Mhm.
As to when it would go to the public, I don't know. Obviously, it will depend on how this test go. In a good situation, the tests all go very well, and we could put something out soon after. Worst case scenario, it's a buggy mess, and it's going to take a long time to sort out to the point that it's presentable. We just don't know at this point. So for us to try to say, well, we're going to have dynamic campaign available to the public at X time frame, until we're actually in test, there's just no way for us to really put a date on that. All I can really relay at this point that it's being very actively worked on by multiple people in the company.
Yeah.
Actually, 3 programmers right now, and of course some designers and lots of testers and things like that. Um, but AI and UI are the big elements right there. Other big one, of course, is ATC, air traffic control. Yep. So I put together a
Oh
design
yes.
with
Hmm.
some US pilots earlier, and that was created, geez, about 5 or 6 years ago now. But I've been going back over it again with a couple new SMEs, and we're refining that a bit based on customer feedback and expectations. So when we do the ATC, it's really important we just don't throw something out there, which is why it's taken obviously longer than we expected. We want to do something that's going to meet as many customer expectations as possible. But tied with the new ATC system, the two other big elements is we're doing a whole new user interface. So we're going completely away from the nested menu system,
Hmm.
more to something akin to what we first developed for the Hind and the Apache,
Oh
where
yeah.
all you need is a four-way hat switch to navigate everything.
That's a
And the
really
other
good
big
UI
element,
actually. Just to call that one out, the systems we have in the Hind and the Apache for controlling our AI crew member, it is very very intuitive and very easy to map to a HOTAS, which I guess is what you're aiming for
we
here.
think so too. Obviously, there's going to be obviously people out there disagree and want different UIs, but there's also a case that no matter what we do, we're never going to make everybody happy. But we found that it works pretty well. So it'll be modified, of course, from what we have in the helicopters. Given the nature of the fixed wing aircraft, but having everything just on a four-way hat switch, which is kind of out of the way and not obstructive, I think it's the way to go. The other big element of ATC is how we do the voiceovers. In that, one of the big problems we have right now with the current comm system, it's all based on lines recorded by voice actors from years and years ago. So most of those actors, actually almost all of them now, are no longer available.
Hmm.
So for us to add lines or modify lines for those parts is next to impossible. So we're really locked into what we have now. So one of the big things we have been looking at for a while now is how we resolve that, make the new comm system for ATC, but not just ATC, but flight comms, JTAC, AWACS, tankers, and so on, future-proof. So we never have to worry. So as you might imagine, what we're doing is we're looking at AI systems, not live AI systems, which require internet connection to a different server, but rather using AI to record the voice files that we then use to create the comm lines.
So it's recordings, but generated by AI.
Correct. And also what we'd be doing is, whereas in the old system, we tended to focus more on small parses, but many parses put together to create a comm line. But this, as you might imagine, would often result in cadences not quite matching what you expect, because the intonation of the beginning of a sentence and the end of a sentence is actually quite different if you know what you're listening for. So we need to have a system that really kind of accounts for that, that if need be, even 5-10 years in the future, using the AI models we have, we can record new lines, amend lines, whatever we need to make that work. So those are kind of the three big elements we're working on right now with the ATC. Design, which we're continuing to update, the UI system, and then how we generate through AI the voice files. So that's kind of where we are right now, ATC.
Trying to avoid the old Operation Flashpoint voice lines.
Oh, geez, I forgot about those. Yeah.
Those were amazing. Oh no, one is down. So yes, that's fantastic. Well, I'm sure that I speak for many when I say we all enjoy seeing you on your YouTube channel. I think you're a great asset to kind of publicizing the things that the company does. So I vote for more WAGs.
Well, earlier asking what my different roles in the company, one of them more so this year is to be a little, maybe more than a little, more available and communicative with our customers. That's one of the reasons why this is just the first of several such interviews I'm going to be doing over the next few months here.
Alrighty, so it sounds like we're getting our wish.
I hope so. I hope people wish this, and I hope they enjoy it. Another element is the DTC, which I know is near and dear to your heart. I know.
Oh, love DTC.
Some of the big things, obviously, the MiG-29 was a big one. That was a lot of the focus on the DTC recently. And we'll hopefully in the next big update, we'll be adding the comm and the radio navigation panels for the MiG-29 in the DTC. In parallel, the other big ones we're working on right now are the new route DTC for the Viper and the Hornet. So that way you can, basically create, I can't remember the exact number, I'm not design on this, is a library of points for those aircraft. And then from that point library, you assign them either as a waypoint, an initial point, a target point, and so on. That's the next big thing we're working on for the DTC for those aircraft. And then after that, of course, then you have different elements kind of related to that, where using that point library, you can also then assign those as creating different lines and pre-brief points for harm shots and things like that. So that's kind of the next big push on the DTC. For the Hornet and the Viper is basically the navigation database and all the different types of properties you can assign to each navigation point.
That's very cool. Well, obviously, I'm excited to hear about that. In regards to the DTC, would you say it's at a
Mhm.
point just now where third parties could make use of those features for their modules, or will it be a little bit longer before that's possible?
I don't know.
Hmm.
I'm not sure how much this is actually integrated into the SDK or third parties right now.
Okay. Okay. But yeah, no. Obviously, I'm very excited about DTC. I'm always excited about
Yeah, I
avionics in
gathered.
general. Like
Mm,
I almost care more about the systems in the aircraft than I do about flying them to a degree.
okay.
Nice. Alrighty. Well, that's like I said. That's everything that I've got on my list. Thank you
Yeah.
very much indeed, Wags, for taking the time today
Oh, you're very
to
welcome.
uh, to answer all of my questions. And I hope chat have enjoyed this little presentation.
Thanks. I
So,
really appreciate your time and listening to me ramble for a while.
a pleasure. Absolutely. Alrighty. Well, take care, sir.
You too.